A 12-year-old boy in a medieval torture device sent one message to the most feared men in Indianapolis at 2:47 a.m., 3 words that made a 250-pound Marine drop to his knees and weep in front of 50 bikers. What he wrote on that cardboard sign shut down 6 city blocks and changed everything. Before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far the Brotherhood reaches. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button because we tell stories about real men, real loyalty, and real justice that the rest of America never hears about. Now, let's get into the story. The notification lit up Mr. Williams' phone at 2:47 a.m. He'd been awake anyway. Old Marine habits die hard, sitting in his garage in Indianapolis, cleaning the carburetor on his '98 Shovelhead. The message was from a kid he'd never met. It had one line that made his calloused fingers freeze mid-wipe. "My name is Keanu. I have no mom or dad. The kids say I'm trash because of my metal brace. Can you please wheel me into school just once so they see I'm not?" 12 hours earlier, that same kid sat in a group home on the east side of Indianapolis, staring at his reflection in a rain-streaked window. Keanu was 12 years old. He weighed 73 pounds, and he was locked inside what looked like a medieval torture device. A halo traction brace, 4 metal rods screwed directly into his skull, connecting to a rigid vest that kept his broken spine immobilized. The doctors said it would take 6 months, maybe a year. Maybe he'd never walk again. The screws ached in the cold. The metal gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the group home hallway like something pulled from a junkyard. That morning on the school bus, a kid named Brett had flicked one of the screws. Hard. "Ding, ding, scrap metal," Brett said, laughing. His friends joined in. "Trash, boy." Discarded parts. Keanu didn't cry. He'd learned not to. But when the lunch tray hit the mud outside the cafeteria, courtesy of Brett's foot, and the aide pretended not to see, something inside Keanu cracked. Not his spine. That was already broken. Something deeper. He wheeled himself back to the group home in silence, ignoring the caseworker's questions, and locked himself in the small room he shared with 2 other foster kids. He opened his tablet. He didn't pray anymore. God hadn't shown up when his parents died in the car crash that paralyzed him. But he'd heard stories about men in leather, men with skulls on their vests, men who protected kids when no one else would, men called the Hells Angels. He found their Facebook page. His hands shook as he typed. Keanu hit send before he could delete it. The message disappeared into the void of Facebook Messenger at 11:34 p.m. on a Tuesday night in Indianapolis. He stared at the screen, watching the little circle spin, then stop. Delivered. Not read. Just delivered. He set the tablet on the nightstand next to the donated Bible he'd never opened, and the pill bottles he couldn't pronounce. Across the room, another foster kid snored. The radiator clanked. Outside, sirens wailed down Washington Street toward some emergency that wasn't his. He didn't expect a response. Why would he? The Hells Angels were legends in Indiana, men who rode thunder through small towns and big cities alike, men who answered to no one but their brothers. What were they going to do for a paralyzed kid in a group home? A kid whose own blood relatives hadn't shown up to claim him after the accident? A kid the system shuffled from facility to facility like a piece of broken furniture no one wanted to repair? Keanu closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The screws throbbed, the vest dug into his ribs. He thought about Brett's face tomorrow, the laughter, the names, scrap metal trash boy. discarded parts. What Keanu didn't know was that Mr. William never slept much. 18 years in the Corps had trained him to survive on 4 hours and black coffee. What Keanu didn't know was that Mr. William checked the club's Facebook messages every morning at 0300 before the sun cracked over the Indianapolis skyline, before the rest of America woke up to their safe suburban lives. What Keanu didn't know was that Mr. William had a daughter once. Had, past tense. She'd been 12 too. Different circumstances. Same age. Same fragility. When Mr. Williams' phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m., he almost ignored it. Probably spam. Probably some wannabe asking to prospect. But something made him swipe. Maybe instinct. Maybe fate. Maybe the ghost of a little girl who used to climb on his bike before the cancer took her. He read the message once, twice, 3 times. His jaw tightened. His throat closed. The wrench in his hand clattered to the concrete floor of his garage on the north side of Indianapolis, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the pre-dawn silence. He stood. He paced. He read it again. Then he made a call. Church, tomorrow, 0600. Everyone. The sun hadn't risen yet when the first bike rumbled into the lot behind the clubhouse on North Meridian Street. Then another. Then 10 more. By 5:45 a.m., the gravel parking lot looked like a Harley-Davidson showroom. Softails, Dynas, Road Kings, choppers with ape hangers that stretched toward the gray Indiana sky. Men climbed off their bikes in silence, breath misting in the October cold, cuts heavy with patches earned through blood and loyalty. They didn't ask questions. When Mr. William called church before dawn, you showed up. Inside, the clubhouse smelled like old leather, cigarette smoke, and motor oil. The American flag hung on the back wall, flanked by a POW MIA banner and a framed photograph of the chapter's founder, a Vietnam vet who'd started this brotherhood in 1971. Mr. Williams stood at the head of the scarred wooden table, phone in hand, jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck stood out like ropes. 12 men sat around him. Prospects stood against the wall. No one spoke. The president of the Indianapolis chapter didn't call emergency church for gossip. Mr. William turned his phone around. On the screen was a photograph Keanu had attached to his message, a selfie taken in the group home bathroom mirror. The halo brace gleamed under the harsh light. 4 metal pins drilled into a child's skull, a thin neck, hollow eyes, and below the image, the message. Mr. William read it aloud, his voice steady until the last sentence. Can you please wheel me into school just once so they see I'm not trash? His voice cracked on the word trash. The room went silent. Someone cursed under their breath. Another man, a 48-year-old former Army Ranger named Dutch, dragged a hand across his face. Where? Dutch asked. East Side. Group home off of Brookville Road. The school? Public middle school. Same district. Dutch nodded. Another member, a man they called Preacher, not because he was religious, but because he'd once talked a suicidal vet off a bridge for 3 hours straight, leaned forward. What are we doing about this? Mr. William looked at every face in that room. These weren't thugs. These were fathers, veterans, mechanics, construction workers, men who'd served their country and found their second family on 2 wheels. Men who lived by a code the rest of America had forgotten. He set the phone down. We ride at 0600 tomorrow. Full chapter. I want every bike we got. Keanu woke up Wednesday morning and immediately regretted sending the message. What was he thinking? The Hells Angels didn't care about some foster kid in a metal cage. He checked his tablet. Nothing. No response. No red receipt. Just that cold, hollow, delivered status mocking him from the screen. He wanted to cry, but his roommate was already awake, and crying was weakness. The group home didn't tolerate weakness. The world didn't tolerate weakness. Especially not in Indianapolis, where even the pigeons looked tough. The morning routine was mechanical. A staff member helped him into the wheelchair. Another one adjusted the halo brace, tightening screws that made his vision blur with pain. Breakfast was cold oatmeal. The school bus was due at 7:15. Keanu wheeled himself to the curb outside the group home, same as every morning, shivering in a donated jacket that didn't zip over the metal vest. The October air bit through the thin fabric. Across the street, a woman walked her dog. Cars passed on Brookville Road, headlights cutting through the fog. Normal people, normal lives. He was not normal. He was trash. At 7:10, Keanu thought he felt something. A vibration, low, deep, like distant thunder rolling across the flat Indiana plains. He looked up. The sky was clear, no storm. But the rumble grew louder, closer. The woman with the dog stopped. The cars slowed. And then Keanu saw it. At the end of the block, where Brookville Road met Shadeland Avenue, the fog seemed to ripple, then part, then explode with chrome and leather and roaring American steel. One motorcycle turned the corner, then 5, then 20, then so many Keanu lost count. They filled the street, 2 lanes wide, engines growling like caged thunder released all at once into the Indianapolis morning. The ground beneath his wheelchair shook. The windows of the group home rattled. The staff came running outside. The woman with the dog backed onto the sidewalk, her mouth open. And at the front of the pack, on a matte black Road King with ape hangers that stretched toward the sky like iron wings, was a man the size of a mountain. He wore a leather cut covered in patches Keanu couldn't read from this distance, but he didn't need to read them. He knew. The Hells Angels had come. The lead bike stopped 10 feet from Keanu's wheelchair. The engine cut. Silence fell like a hammer. Then the rest of the pack shut down one by one, until the only sound left was the hiss of cooling metal and the distant wail of a siren somewhere across Indianapolis. The man on the black Road King swung his leg over and stood. He was massive, 6'4", maybe 250, with a gray beard braided at the chin and arms covered in ink that told stories Keanu couldn't begin to guess. His cut read President on the front. On the back, the Death's Head grinned beneath the words, Hells Angels MC Indianapolis. Mr. William walked forward slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel. Behind him, the street was a sea of leather and chrome. Keanu counted 30 bikes, 40, 50. More were still rolling in from side streets, blocking intersections, filling the entire block. A police cruiser appeared at the corner, lights flashing. But the officer took one look at the sheer number of bikers and radioed for backup instead of stepping out. This wasn't a crime. This was a statement. This was American Brotherhood in motion. Keanu's hands gripped the wheels of his chair. His heart hammered against the metal vest. He wanted to say something, but his throat had closed. Mr. William stopped in front of him and knelt, slowly, deliberately. A man that big didn't kneel for anyone, but he knelt for this kid. Their eyes met, Keanu's wide and terrified, Mr. Williams red-rimmed and wet. The biker reached out one massive, scarred hand and rested it gently on the wheelchair's armrest. "You, Keanu?" His voice was gravel and whiskey and years of shouting over engine noise. Keanu nodded. "You sent me a message last night?" Another nod. Mr. Williams' jaw worked. He glanced back at his brothers, then returned his gaze to the boy. "You asked if you're trash?" Keanu's lip trembled. He'd made a sign, a piece of cardboard he'd torn from a box in the group home recycling bin. He'd written on it with a black Sharpie in shaky letters while his roommate slept. He'd hidden it under his blanket all night, unsure if he'd have the guts to hold it up. But now, with 50 bikers staring at him and the entire east side of Indianapolis watching, Keanu pulled the sign from his lap and held it against his chest. 3 words. 1 question. "Am I trash?" That's when Mr. William broke. The president of the Indianapolis chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, a man who'd survived Fallujah, bar fights, and a divorce that nearly killed him, dropped his forehead onto Keanu's lap and sobbed. Not quiet tears. Not the kind you hide, the kind that shake your shoulders and tear sounds from your chest you didn't know you could make. His massive hands gripped the sides of the wheelchair, knuckles white, and he wept like a father who'd found his child alive after thinking they were gone forever. The 50 bikers behind him stood in silence. Some looked away, others didn't bother hiding their own tears. Dutch, the former ranger, wiped his eyes with the back of his tattooed hand. Preacher stared at the sky, jaw clenched. A prospect in the back, a young guy barely 22, turned his head and let the tears roll down his face unchecked. This was the Brotherhood. This was what the rest of America didn't understand about men who wore the patch. They didn't cry for weakness. They cried for injustice. They cried when a child asked if he was trash because the system had failed him so completely he believed it. Mr. William lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot. His beard was wet. He looked at Keanu, really looked at him, and saw the metal screws in his skull, the thin arms, the donated clothes, the fear and hope and desperation all tangled together in a 12-year-old's face. He saw his daughter. He saw every kid the world had thrown away. He saw America's forgotten children, the ones who fell through the cracks while politicians argued and caseworkers shuffled paperwork and families scrolled past their stories on Facebook without stopping. "Listen to me," Mr. Williams said, his voice rough as sandpaper. He placed both hands on Keanu's shoulders, careful to avoid the metal frame. "You are not trash, you hear me? You are not trash. You're a warrior. You're still fighting, still breathing, still here. That makes you tougher than most men I know." Keanu's tears came then. Silent, streaming. He clutched the cardboard sign so hard it crumpled. Mr. Williams stood. He turned to his brothers. Then he did something no one expected. He shrugged off his cut, the leather vest that bore his patches, his rank, his years of earned respect, and draped it over Keanu's shoulders. It swallowed the boy whole. The sleeves hung past the wheelchair's armrests. The weight of it settled over the halo brace like armor over a knight. "You're with us now." The cut was warm. That was the first thing Keanu noticed. Warm from Mr. Williams' body heat, heavy with the weight of patches sewn into the leather, skulls, flags, city names, dates that meant something to someone. The Death's Head logo pressed against his back. He couldn't see it, but he felt it, felt the shift in the air around him. The staff members from the group home stood frozen on the porch. The woman with the dog stared. The police officer at the corner lowered his radio. And Brett, who'd flicked the screws and called him scrap metal, stood on the opposite sidewalk with his mouth open, backpack hanging limp from one shoulder. Mr. Williams stepped behind the wheelchair. His hands gripped the handles. He leaned down, close to Keanu's ear. "You ready?" Keanu didn't trust his voice. He nodded. Good. 'Cause we're about to walk you into that school, and every kid, every teacher, every janitor and lunch lady and administrator is going to see you roll in with the full weight of the Indianapolis Charter behind you. You understand what that means? Keanu shook his head. Mr. Williams smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd decided someone was about to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget. It means you're protected. It means your family. And it means anyone who touches you. Anyone who calls you trash. Anyone who so much as looks at you wrong answers to us. All of us. He straightened and turned to the pack. Mount up! The engines roared to life in a symphony of American steel. 50 Harleys firing in unison, the sound rolling across the east side of Indianapolis like a war cry. The bikers formed 2 lines, creating a corridor of chrome and leather that stretched from the curb to the school entrance 2 blocks away. Mr. William began to push the wheelchair forward, slowly, deliberately, and as they moved, the bikes rolled alongside them, flanking Keanu on both sides, a moving honor guard escorting a child who'd been told he was worthless into a building that had allowed him to believe it. Keanu looked up. The sky was gray. The air was cold. But for the first time since the accident, since his parents died, since the metal screws were drilled into his skull, he didn't feel like trash. He felt like he mattered. He felt like someone had answered. The school doors opened before they reached them. The principal stood there, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Henderson, who'd worked in the Indianapolis public school system for 23 years. She'd seen a lot, but she'd never seen this. 50 motorcycles idling in the bus lane, a child in a halo brace wearing a Hell's Angels cut, and a wall of bikers, veterans, fathers, men who'd earned their patches through loyalty and blood, standing shoulder to shoulder like an honor guard for a fallen soldier. "We're bringing him to class," Mr. Williams said. It wasn't a question. Mrs. Henderson opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Keanu, looked at the bikers, looked at the police cruiser parked at the corner, the officer inside making no move to intervene. She stepped aside. "First period starts in 5 minutes." The hallway was chaos. Kids pressed against lockers. Teachers stepped out of classrooms. The school security guard, a retired cop named Martinez, stood at the end of the hall with his arms crossed. But when Mr. William made eye contact, Martinez gave a small nod. Respect, recognized respect. Keanu's classroom was on the 2nd floor. There was no elevator. Mr. William didn't hesitate. He lifted the wheelchair, lifted all 73 pounds of boy and metal and medical equipment, and carried him up the stairs like he weighed nothing. Dutch and Preacher followed. The rest of the chapter stayed below, filling the lobby, a silent reminder that this child was not alone. Room 204, pre-algebra. Mr. William pushed open the door without knocking. The teacher, a young man fresh out of college, froze mid-sentence. 28 7th graders turned in their seats. And there, in the 3rd row, was Brett. His face went white. Mr. William wheeled Keanu to the front of the room and locked the chair's brakes. He leaned down, kissed the top of Keanu's head, right above the metal halo, and then turned to address the class. His voice was quiet, deadly quiet. "This is Keanu. He's under our protection now. That means if he's got a problem, we've got a problem. If someone disrespects him, they disrespect us. If someone hurts him, they answer to the Indianapolis Charter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Are we clear?" Silence. Absolute silence. Mr. William nodded. He straightened the cut on Keanu's shoulders one last time, then walked out. His boots echoed in the hallway. The engine started outside, and as the rumble faded into the Indianapolis morning, Keanu sat in that classroom wearing leather that wasn't his, surrounded by kids who would never call him trash again. The bullying stopped that day. Completely. Brett transferred schools 2 weeks later. The other kids, the ones who'd laughed, who'd looked away, who'd let it happen, suddenly found reasons to be kind. They held doors. They offered to carry Keanu's backpack. They saved him a seat at lunch. Not because they'd changed, because they were afraid. And maybe that wasn't justice, but in a world that had given Keanu nothing but pain and abandonment, fear was a start. Mr. William came back every Friday. Not to intimidate, not to threaten, just to check in. He'd park his Road King in the bus lane, walk into the school, and sit with Keanu in the cafeteria. They'd talk about bikes, about the Marines, about what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. Sometimes other brothers came with him. Dutch brought his daughter once, a high school senior who talked to Keanu about college. Preacher brought homemade chili in a Tupperware container because he'd noticed Keanu never finished the school lunch. The club adopted the group home. They funded a wheelchair ramp. They organized a toy drive at Christmas. They showed up. 6 months later, when the doctors removed the halo brace and told Keanu he'd regained 60% mobility in his legs, the first person he called was Mr. William. The chapter threw a party at the clubhouse. Burgers, Coke, a cake that said Warrior in red frosting. Keanu stood for the first time in front of 50 bikers who'd become his family. And when his legs shook and he almost fell, 10 hands reached out to steady him. He didn't fall. He never fell again. On his 13th birthday, Mr. William gave him a gift. A leather vest, not a full cut. He wasn't a member, wasn't old enough, hadn't earned that. But a black leather vest with a single patch sewn on the back. It was custom made. It read, "Property of Hell's Angels MC, Indianapolis." Protected. Keanu cried when he put it on. Mr. William didn't. He'd done his crying on a curb a year ago when a child had asked if he was trash, and the answer had broken something open in a hardened man's chest. Keanu wore that vest every day, to school, to physical therapy, to the group home, and eventually to the foster family that adopted him, a couple who'd seen the news story, who'd watched the video someone had recorded of 50 bikers escorting a paralyzed kid into school, and who'd decided they wanted to be part of that story. Keanu never forgot what Mr. William taught him. That family isn't blood. That strength isn't about walking. That trash is something you throw away. And the Hells Angels don't throw away their own. Not in Indianapolis. Not in America. Not ever. If you believe that every child deserves someone who will fight for them when the world calls them trash, like and share this story. Subscribe now for more stories about the brotherhood, loyalty, and men who show up when everyone else looks away. Also check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now, specially crafted for you.